Welcome back to LutzTalk. I'm Austin Lutz. If you're new here, we're all about the real-world application of the tech that keeps the world connected, from 5G and AI to the physical infrastructure we rely on every single day. Today's guest is someone I've not only personally known for over a decade, but someone I used to work for. Back then, he was already the guy who saw the intersection of creativity and logic before most people even knew there was a bridge. He spent over 20 years proving that enterprise IT doesn't have to be rigid to be secure, and that the best solutions often come from looking at a problem through a different lens, quite literally. Matt Parker is an IT engineer specializing in macOS at PrizePicks. With a background in photography from Virginia Intermont College and 2 decades of experience building IT environments, Matt has become a leading voice in the Mac admins community. He's here to talk about the shift from fire and forget scripts to the world of macOS GitOps, and why the most important tool in an engineer's toolkit isn't a line of code, but a creative perspective. Matt, it's been a long time. Thanks for joining me.
It's an honor to be here. It has been a long time. I appreciate
It
it.
has been a long time. It's been, 10 plus years
Yes.
since I worked for you.
Has it really been that long?
I think, yeah, it has to have been because previous role was 10 years, and then even before that, so yeah, almost 12.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's been a while. I always like to open up these interviews and talk a little bit about your background. I think it's important, especially for you. But how does a guy like you with a BA in photography get into the world of technology? I think it's an interesting segue, but also I think there's a lot of similarities in having an interest in creativity, and then also using that creativity in the IT world. So talk to me a little bit about that.
Yeah. I was, I guess, fortunate enough to be an old guy and got started with technology when it was, just up and coming. So
Yeah.
I was in school as we were still using film, developing pictures, old darkroom, but we were also just now seeing a little bit of digital imaging.
Okay.
And that really caught on. So I was using Photoshop 1.0
Wow.
and all of that. And that really kind of took my interest and kept it. And then when I got out of school, I realized I'm not going to make any money being a photographer.
I'm sure
But
it's a thought that a lot of people have.
yeah,
Yeah.
but I really enjoy this working with the computers and
Yeah.
kind of went into that realm, still stayed in the creative world and did some um, graphic design and realized I was a really bad graphic designer, but I knew a lot about the computer and I just ran with that and
Yeah.
took the IT side of working with creatives. And then that became my career.
Do you think that I know, obviously we make, we've made some jokes in the past about, obviously, getting older, but you've seen the progression, I think, better than most, where you've lived the life of next to zero
Mhm.
technology, moving into a world now where we have near AGI, where we have computers that do most everything for us automatically. Do you think that, or did you think even 10 years ago when we worked together that we would ever get to the point where we have such advanced automation, whether it's through, the platforms that you've built or through artificial intelligence?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
I always, knew that technology computers were going to be much more integrated and more integrated as we moved on, but I
Hmm.
never guessed it would be this high level
Yeah.
as it is now.
Yeah.
And I think it's an interesting thing to explore because I think we have to be careful that we don't give in too much.
Hmm. What do you mean by that?
I mean, I always like to say when we work with computers and what you and I do are kind of supporting lots of technology.
Yeah.
I like to say we don't support the technology. We support the users of the technology.
Hmm.
And that's where I worry that we kind of get into deep where all we think about is the technology, not the users
Hmm.
of the technology.
So you think, the technology is more of like a toolkit that rather than like the product itself, like like technology is something you use, not something that you have.
100%.
Okay. Gotcha.
100%.
Um, when we, on the topic of technology, what is your thoughts on, I think you probably know better than me, having lived longer, certainly, and then also seeing the progression from next to no technology to where we are today. But what are your thoughts on the people that are apprehensive to use technology? And I see, and where I want to frame this question is, I hear from a lot of people who are, like in their 40s and 50s that are apprehensive about the use of like artificial
Mhm.
intelligence. And I think there's two different types of people, either people that abstain from using it and just don't ever want, to have any interest in it, or people that lean into it. So where do you lean on that?
I lean into it totally. Again, like I said, and we've talked about it, it's a tool, and
Yeah.
you can control how much impact it has on your life if you use it as a tool.
Yeah.
If you incorporate it and understand the impact and how it works, then you can decide how far and how much of your life it takes over. And if you want it to take over a ton of your life, you can let that in really deep, do a deep dive.
Yeah.
Or you can just say, this is something that I understand and I can limit how much it's used.
Yeah, and I see a lot of that. I mean, with, a lot of my friends, they use it every day in their
Mhm.
jobs. And then also with people that just choose to use it for certain tasks, like, automating maybe a specific script to do one-off things, like that's okay too. I I I've written about this several times, but I do struggle with the thought of people's reliance on AI and how we're entering a world, I feel like, where sometimes people are using it as a crutch rather than a tool. Like they rely on it for everything rather than using it for good.
Yeah, 100%. I think it's a fine line
Yeah.
to incorporate it, use it as a booster
Booster's a good descriptor. Yeah, I like that.
instead of a crutch. I really believe you have to have a solid foundation to build upon.
Yeah.
And if you don't have that foundation, then it can very much become a crutch because you don't have something to fall back on.
Well, I've been in group chats with buddies of mine. We've talked about this kind of having a foundation of, whether it's an IT background or an understanding of how software development
Mhm.
works, I think is oftentimes more valuable than like understanding specific syntax of languages. Just because, I meet a lot of people that want to use AI to write code, but they don't necessarily understand front end, back end, middleware, APIs. And I think when you have people like that, they go and they'll build something that works, but it doesn't necessarily scale or have like a plan for the future. It's kind of like vaporware, where you build it and it's like really cool, and then it doesn't mean anything 6 months down the
Yeah.
road.
I mean, what happens 6 months down the road, like you say, and now I need this piece of code to do something additionally. And
Yeah,
you're just like, well, I don't even know.
yeah. You don't want to have it go through and like re waste all your tokens on that,
Right.
and then go through and like re-architect the app entirely. Like it's always better to have a platform. Um, Let's shift gears a little bit and talk a little bit about your unapologetic affinity for Apple and for all the products that
Hmm.
that they have made
Yes.
since forever. Um, where did that come from, and why do you choose to focus in that
It
world?
came from my foundation and getting started in um, technology from my photography days. Back in the day, it was the Mac
That's what you use
that's
for
what you
photography.
used.
Okay.
And then before that, I kind of came to realize it as I started to use the Mac more back in school.
Hmm.
My dad always had Apples. So we had like before the Mac, we had the Apple IIs and all of that. And we were,
That was the 5 and a quarter. Was it the 5 and a quarter floppies that would
yep,
go in the front?
yep. And
Yeah.
we were, typing basic code in
Yeah.
and I didn't even realize that foundation was there until I got back into the Mac. Like, oh yeah, I remember sitting there
Hmm.
back in the old school days.
Yeah, that's wild.
And the way of thinking always just kind of clicked with me. It is kind of a more different way of approaching a computer. At
Yeah.
least it was back then. Things have kind of become,
There's a lot of parity nowadays with with Windows and even some flavors of Linux. The front end to
yeah.
macOS.
So, back in the day, DOS, I'm like, I don't want to deal with
Yeah.
the DOS stuff.
Right.
So that's kind of why it took off. And then the other thing was I was always in the what I'll call the creative world.
Mm.
And so I started to support creative workers,
Oh
and
yeah.
they
Okay.
were always on the Mac. And so that's just kind of like,
So would you say it's more of a personal preference, or it was more of a product of design where you were kind of forced into that world of supporting users that use those particular products?
uh, I would almost say both
Okay.
because it was a personal preference that allowed me to
Mm.
then say, I understand this world. And at that point, there weren't a lot of us that could work with the Mac inside of a network, inside of an environment that was, you know, an AD or things like that.
Yeah. That's interesting. I mean, because you look at the enterprise landscape, right? You work today at a company called Prize Picks, and obviously it's a larger company. You've worked at large companies, you worked at small companies, you worked in high finance, or sorry, higher ed. um, and you think even 10 years ago, there wasn't not a lot of Macs in the environment. And
Right.
I've looked in a lot of places. I travel to New York City a lot, and as you walk through the offices nowadays, you see often more Mac computers than you do Windows. I'm curious what your thoughts are on why we see that in the enterprise more. Um, and don't use the cop out of it's easier for end
No,
users.
not at all.
I think it's an easy cop out because everyone's like, oh, I'm familiar with the Mac, especially the younger generations.
We really started to see the Mac take off in the enterprise is because CEOs started to bring them in.
Oh, interesting. Okay,
And
like as personal devices, kind of,
well,
or
as they were those people that were comfortable with it,
okay,
and they said, I'm the boss. This is what I want to
sure,
use.
yeah,
And
makes sense.
so then you started to have infrastructure to properly manage and secure those devices because you have some high level employees that have these things.
Right.
And then once that happened, companies started to allow choice.
Mhm. Like the
For,
BYOD,
I mean,
ARC.
yeah, it's BYOD, but then IBM
Mhm.
was one of the first companies to come in and say, you have the choice of which machine you want to use.
Okay.
And so we've seen more and more of those things kind of filter in. And then I think we're starting to see more of them now, like you're seeing in like you said, your travels,
Yeah.
because the management side is a little freer. I'll say is a little
Freer.
looser. I
Okay.
don't know if it's the right thing.
Accepting maybe, or I mean,
Yeah, it's more of
like whatever it takes to get the job done kind of mentality.
well, the management side of like me managing a Mac
Hmm.
allows for a little bit easier use and a little more flexibility and freedom of the user or for the user.
Yeah.
So, I've been in multiple different places where people say, I use Windows, I want to use Windows, and they see kind of the things that are allowed and can be done on the Mac that aren't as restrictive, and they want to
Okay.
switch over.
What would you say? I know it's interesting you say it like that way because people that are listening might perceive that as less security.
Hmm.
I don't think that's necessarily the case. I think macOS does a great job of, especially in, excuse me, some of the newer interfaces or the newer operating systems of having granular permissions for certain things like microphones and cameras. But what would you say to people that are apprehensive of the security side of macOS compared to Windows?
Um, I would say it's funny that when it comes down to management, that
Yeah.
we actually have to do less to
Oh,
secure them because of Apple's adamant kind of we are privacy focused from the user standpoint.
hmm.
So it actually sometimes makes the management side even harder
Yeah.
because Apple doesn't even want to expose some of those end user privacy things to the management side.
Got it. Okay.
So it's almost can be more and less secure depending on, so it's a balance.
Did you see that in your previous role as a like a Jamf admin, where
100%.
you were having, because again, those not familiar, Jamf is a product that is used by teams to manage Mac computers, but you saw that, you said, in those environments as well.
Yeah,
It's just
see it every day.
difficult to manage.
Yeah, the perfect example, let's think about when we need to have someone uh, use their cameras on their Macs.
Okay, seems like a normal request. I mean,
Normal
very,
request, of
yeah.
course. I can't say that that camera can be used without ever prompting the user. Every time that that camera is going to be used by an application, the
Mhm.
user must approve it.
Interesting.
I
Okay.
can I can allow the user not to approve that, but I can't ever turn the camera on. I can't ever turn a mic on.
Like a forced from the admin side, like kind of like
Exactly.
spying
I
on
can't
the
ever
user.
do that. It
Wow.
must,
Even with the tools.
even with the tools.
Wow.
There are certain things that are user only approved. Mic, screen recording.
Wow. Yeah, that's interesting. I think, as a user of a MacBook, I find it incredibly frustrating that some of the things that I personally don't want to control, I have to control.
Mhm.
From the periodic updating of permissions that are required across the microphone and the camera, and then like disk level access for things like codecs and Claude, like
Yes.
all the things that need full disk permissions to go execute whatever. Um, I find it frustrating, but I also understand it. I
Yeah.
think we have for so long we've had the notion that Windows computers can just be fully automated, and which they have been.
Yeah.
Mac's kind of taking a different route for that. Like,
Yeah, it is. They have always been a personal computer, a
yeah,
user-focused computer, and we are trying to force them into the enterprise.
yeah,
And that's where that friction comes from.
yeah, makes sense. Um, so we talk about like the friction, and I think you and I have spoken a little bit before this around some tooling that you've worked on, and more specifically around your upcoming workshop on macOS GitOps at Penn State. When is that
That
event?
is July the 7th, I believe,
Okay.
is when the first day it starts.
Okay, perfect. And you are doing you're doing a session, like a deep dive into a product that you have built titled Shikomi.
Hmm.
Is that right?
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So Shikomi is the Japanese word for preparation.
Hmm, okay.
And so this product, or it's more of, I wouldn't call it a product, it's more of kind of a scaffolding or a framework
Okay.
that allows you to properly set up and prepare your scripting environment for managing Macs in a secure way, in a repeatable way. And that framework is there to, you call the Shikomi command
Okay.
and it says, okay, what do you want to do? What variables do you need? What types of kind of, it asks a series of questions on what do you want to do and how do you want
Oh, so it has a prompt component built
to,
into it. So
exactly.
like you're guiding the user through what you or what they want to
Yeah.
build or execute.
Yeah. And then it kind of sets up that framework
Mhm.
and then it sets up an entire GitOps workflow to ensure that uh, no secrets ever get uh, committed to a repo. It also, when it logs, it makes sure that any of those secrets are uh, removed from the logs or
Okay.
kind of excluded in the logs. And then it also makes sure that before you do any type of committing to a repo that your code works properly, it passes a basic, shell check or linting test,
Hmm.
and that any versioning, so it'll make sure that you have in your repo a README, a changelog, and a version of your script, and it makes sure that everything matches so that the versioning is always correct. And then it will has a system built in that you can say, now bump the version, a minor version with
Hmm.
this change, and it keeps all the versions.
As as an admin of macOS, why would I care about having a tool like that other than, just from a pure automation perspective? What major benefits would that give me if I do that day to day?
I think the biggest benefits are or come into play when you start to work with a team.
Okay, interesting.
If there's more than one of you that are managing the scripts that are run in your environment,
Hmm.
we now have a framework that we can work within to keep things consistent, to keep the versioning proper. And then with the tool, I've also built it in so that no tool ever gets committed into your production workflow without another person reviewing that code.
Got it. Okay, so the real value I think in the tool, and correct me if I'm wrong, is w- w- a system already exists today in Git to be able to do version control. That's not
Y-
what you're solving for. You're
y-
solving for the actual framework that manages all the components even before you get to the versioning.
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah. So it
got it.
basically will scaffold and set up your repos for you before it ever even gets into Git. So then when it
That's
gets up
cool.
there,
That's cool, and I'm sure that scales well, right?
yeah.
I
Oh,
mean,
yeah.
yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Um, Do you guys use that today? I mean, I would assume that it gets used,
It's,
but is it getting used today at the scale where you work and other people that you
I'm
know?
introducing it. It's fairly new.
Okay.
So it's open source. I'm starting to make it available, and the introduction will be at the Mac Admins conference in July. It'll be introducing it to the community.
Oh, phenomenal. That's really cool. I think you've known me quite a long time, and I think going from the daily life of firefighting,
Mhm.
in the admin, the IT admin space. It's an area you've spent the majority, if not all of your career in assessing the problem, figuring out what needs to be done, and then correcting the problem. We see so much of Git getting used in software development, and I think we're starting to see more of that make its arc into the IT side of things.
Yeah.
And maybe it's been around for longer, but I'm seeing more of it in the last couple of years. Um, what would your advice be to people that are early in their careers and that are working on a help desk or working as a sysadmin, trying to figure out where to incorporate some of these, applications like Shikomi?
Um, I would more back it out and start to talk about how do you introduce your thinking into roles like that.
Hmm.
So if we start to think about um, if you're going to incorporate some of this thinking into a help desk type environment, a lot of people like to always want to make sure that they are the one who knows and
Mm.
I understand it all and I know. Don't be afraid to ask somebody else, hey, check my work,
Yeah.
or don't be afraid to say, I don't know, because that's that whole kind of like peer review system that gets built into something like a Shikomi where the framework is there, but also there's that checks and balances piece built in. So I think you get comfortable with having people review your work is a huge piece of it.
Yeah, I mean, when we work together, I think, it's not that we didn't know. I think it's always just good to have a second set of eyes to say, does this make sense?
Yeah.
And, you know, I have worked in environments where people pride themselves on not doing that as a sign of, I know what I'm doing. And I've also worked in places where people overextend and have everyone check their work and
Mhm.
sometimes have do their work for them. So there's a fine balance, I think, between
There is.
being an expert in doing something and then also asking for too much help where it's like, okay, man, like you've got to kind of, make a decision here on where you want to go.
Yeah.
So I think it's interesting how, even workflows where they were GUI based, point and click and just click through a bunch of stuff, that's transitioning a lot to Git workflows where it's
100%.
all automated through software.
Yeah. I mean, if we look at it from the IT standpoint, they call it infrastructure as code.
Yeah.
Let me define my
Yeah. Yep.
infrastructure.
Yep. Heard that. Um, we've kind of we've kind of gone through and talked a little bit about some of the GitOps stuff. I want to talk a little more about the human side of things. You're an interesting guy. I think we've talked about this before of, obviously going from a career or from an interest in photography all the way into the software side. I consider a lot of people in IT nowadays software developers
Mhm.
types people, with the help of Claude, Cursor, Codex. Everyone's sort of a software
Yes.
developer. I've written about this and I've talked to my buddies about this where, the term nowadays that people use is builder, right?
Mhm.
Where maybe you're not writing code and you're not a syntax master, but you know what to do and you know how to go and like execute on an idea. Again, whether it's built by Claude or Cursor
Right.
or whatever. I'm just curious, we reconnected after quite a while, but like, where do you see the value in maintaining relationships with people that you've worked with along the way? And not from a pure, I think I'm going to get some value out of this down the road way. Because I know you personally, I've always liked the way you do things. And I consider you a friend of mine, but like, where do you think we're going to see the world head in the next couple years with so much dependency on AI and how you don't get the pair programming
Mhm.
of the world that you used to get 5 years ago or even, 2 years ago?
Where do I think it's gonna go, or where do
Yeah.
I hope it's gonna go?
Let's start with think and
Yeah.
then I'll close it
Yeah.
out with hope
I
because
think
I think two different, you're
yeah,
right. Two,
very much
two different questions.
I think we're going to see people. I don't know what the right word is. Create more relationships with these artificial personalities.
Yeah. Yeah. I gave, my Mac Mini a name,
Yeah.
as a way to kinda, like, instantiate, like,
Mhm.
a thing rather than calling it Mac Mini 1
Right.
to kinda build something.
Yeah, so I think we're gonna see a lot more of that,
Okay.
and it that can be a good and a bad thing. So I think we're gonna see a deep dive into it, and I think, unfortunately, we're probably gonna see some people that are gonna kind of pull away a little bit from society.
Yeah.
Um,
I've seen some of that as well.
where I hope it goes is that we incorporate it more into our relationships, where it kind of becomes, again, a tool that allows us
Like,
to
frees up time maybe to
yeah,
do
it
other
allows
things.
us to connect at a human level better
Yeah.
and more.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you follow this, all the stuff with OpenClaw
Mhm.
that's happened and, Pete, I think Steinberger went to,
Yep, yep.
OpenAI. You know, I think that is an incredibly powerful tool and more so an idea because, him going to OpenAI has kind of reshaped how we look at agentic AI and how, you know, a lot of the things that we do in our day jobs and even in our personal lives could be simply handled with an agent, like
Yes.
transactional things, scheduling, all stuff that we've had products for, like little macOS toolbar apps. Like you probably have all of them running
Yeah.
on your Mac. I've personally found some really cool use cases with OpenClaw to be able to automate some of the things that I would go and do every single day. And talk like you, right? I think there's going to be a deep incorporation of those
Yes.
technologies into personal lives. I think it's going to free up a lot of time for people to spend more time together. But there's always going to be like the little group that's like, I'm going to sit in the basement and just work with
Right,
AI.
yeah.
We're going to have a whole family of characters, which quite frankly, I hope doesn't happen. Um, when we look at, going from your career in higher ed, and then going, to a company like Price Picks, where uh, clearly two very
Mhm.
different schools of thought. Um, what would you say your biggest transition was when moving jobs between the two? Like, and let me reframe this more specifically. What was your biggest challenge?
Uh, it's a tough one because there's a ton of different challenges, but I would say the biggest challenge was the pace at which the enterprise environment works versus the higher ed environment. Um, in higher ed, there's a lot of cyclical work. You
Hmm.
know, students come in for a semester, you've got a break. They come in for a semester, you've got a summer. We always had that time to catch up and let me get my environment prepared for the next.
Like lining up projects and
Mm,
doing busy work kind of when you had downtime,
yeah,
like that kind of
and
stuff. Yeah.
I need to refresh computers. Well, I've got a whole 2 months where nobody's using a computer in this in this classroom,
Yeah.
and you go to the enterprise world, and there's no downtime,
Yeah.
and people want to all the time. I think that was one of the biggest mind shifts for me. And then the other piece was that um, there's no money in higher ed
Yeah.
when it comes to technology,
Sure.
and that was always a struggle. And
Do it for the love of the game type of mentality. I mean, you
and
do see it with school teachers,
yeah,
too. I mean, it's kind of the same deal, right?
and not just money for like
Like you,
salaries,
yeah, but like money to do things like
money for like
projects.
yeah, like
Yeah.
I had many years where I was running a 5 department college. And I didn't know what my budget was from year to year because it all depended on what the state decided they were gonna give us that particular time, and sometimes you didn't find out until 3/4 of the way through the year.
Yeah.
What
And I'm sure that changes your thought process as a leader in IT where it's like, do we hold the money back and, save it for next year, or do we go all in and get what we need to now in hopes that these devices are going to last for many years to come? And I'm sure that's part of your decision making, right?
100%, and the funny thing is, that's the other different way of thinking is in higher ed, what you got this year had to be spent this year, and you didn't know what you were gonna get next year.
Oh, interesting. Okay. It's
And
like the
so
old, like buy the office chairs now.
yes.
You've seen the episode of The Office where,
Yeah,
they have a budget overrun or whatever, and he has to spend the money,
before
or
the
he pays himself the bonus.
yes.
It's kind of the
Yeah.
same deal.
It's very much the same deal, and we used to, like, go, "Okay, now we have X thousands dollars left there, let's buy some office supplies."
Yeah. Gosh, that's such an interesting way to frame it. I definitely agree with that. I mean,
Mm.
I've spent most of my career working in
Mhm.
smaller companies. I've worked for a large company. It's been a while, even before we worked together. Um, but certainly it's when and my wife's a teacher, so I understand the whole budget shortfall where
Yep,
it's like you're not sure where the money's going to come from, but at the end of the day, the thing that you have to deliver still has to be delivered,
right,
regardless if the money's there or not. And again, we're not talking about, like income money for you. It's like for the department. How do we buy these laptops that the students are going to need to be able to deliver, projects and do the things they need
right,
to do to
yeah,
be successful? Um, Wanted to shift a little bit too into continuous learning. I think people often think about um, learning as kind of a finite thing where you go to high school, you go to college, and then after college, you just kind of go into a job. Um, I get asked this all the time, and people would say, "Oh, well, Austin, you work in IT, like you just know things, and how do you just know things?" And I tell them all the time, it's like every day it feels like I'm going to school. Um,
yep,
the term "fake it till you make it" really doesn't sink in until you're, at 2 a.m. trying to figure out a problem that you said you could resolve, but you don't really know how it even works. And I think that's the quick learning that we don't really think about when we talk to students now. And maybe I'm out of touch a little bit with higher ed, but I think teaching someone to be a better problem solver is a lot better than teaching them how to solve the problem.
100%. Uh, I think problem solving, curiosity about a problem, those things are, skills that a lot of people don't have anymore.
Yeah.
They want to solve that specific problem instead of approaching something and trying to understand a new and different way to come at the problem. Let's look at it from a different perspective, and
Yeah.
we can actually solve this in a better way, not this specific way.
Yeah, it's like the old, I used to use this when I would talk to people around, understanding syntax on Cisco switches,
Mhm.
where it was like, yes, it's very important that you understand the syntax of how to configure like a Cisco switch or Juniper, Fortinet, whatever. But it's way more important that you understand that there's layer one, layer two are Ethernet frames, layer three is the IP layer, like or the network layer. And understanding the OSI model in networking it is definitely the most important thing because you
Mhm.
can use that to build off of every step of your career. I mean, I think about that even now, at 35, I think about the OSI model every day when I troubleshoot a problem. Is it plugged in? Cool. What's happening at
Right.
layer two? Do we have routing? Like so on and so forth as we go up the ladder. Um, so, you being a degreed person in IT, do you feel like having a college degree has made you more successful than somebody who has the same level of curiosity?
No, not at all.
Why do you say that?
Um, I think you use the right word, curiosity, the same level of curiosity. And that is no matter degree, no degree, that level of curiosity is what's going to get you past. And so many times you see somebody who has a very specific degree,
Mhm.
or we've seen it in, the networking world. They have, the certifications out the wazoo.
Yeah.
And so they understand the answer from a very technical book level,
Yeah.
but they don't have the curiosity to understand why that is the right answer and how everything came up to.
Yeah. How did you get to this answer?
Right.
Not why is it the answer?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's why I say that doesn't make you that much more successful.
Hmm.
Some of the best people I've ever hired had no college
Yeah.
degree. And, we have worked with those same people. And
Oh yeah. No, I know. I mean, it's interesting. I mean, I always tell people all the time, like, I think it's important, to get education. But education doesn't define you because once you get a degree, it's a lifelong
yes,
education.
and I think there's a difference between getting education
And
and
being
getting a degree,
okay, interesting distinction there.
you know?
What are your thoughts there on that?
I mean, you can get education on the job.
Yeah, true. Yeah,
I mean, think about how many things that you learn and understand just by going through the job and figuring it out,
yeah.
you know?
It's like there's no college for, and maybe there is. I'm not aware of any, but there's no college for like plumbers, right? You don't go to the University of North Carolina at Charlotte and become a plumber. You go work as an apprentice, and then you become an expert plumber.
100%.
I know lots of electricians, plumbers, HVAC technicians, um, n- n- not only do well financially, but are really smart problem solving
Yeah,
type
yeah.
people. Um, in the same vein, I also know people that have PhDs and master's degrees that are some of the smartest people I've ever met in my life. So I agree with you. I don't necessarily think it's the education. I think it's the mindset of continued education.
Yes, 100%. It's curiosity. It's wanting to, like, why is it that way?
Yeah.
How come it can't be this other way? And let me dig in and figure those things out.
Yeah. Um, in the same vein, I think, for those listening, somebody like you who has been in the industry for 20 plus years, how do you remain relevant to the jobs that are needed to be filled? And how do you marry those up with your own career interests? Because I think it's easy working in IT to kind of get into a job that you feel comfortable doing and you get really good at doing it. And then you do that job until one day that job doesn't exist. So how do you stay relevant, Matt?
Um, I think the best way to stay relevant is to be diverse and to surround yourself with not just diverse from a technology standpoint, but surround yourself with a diverse set of different types of people.
Mhm.
Um, don't just focus only on the technology side of things. Learn about the people in other areas of the company you work in and what their needs are. That helps you stay relevant, because if you can understand things from their perspective,
Yeah.
that's one of the most important things, I think, is to put yourself in the other side's shoes, because you then understand the problem from their side. That makes you more relevant because you have an understanding from both the user and the tech side.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think about this, good way to frame that. I think of it this way of like, if you're a software developer and you only keep software developer friends and you only ask their opinions, you will never understand what other pitfalls
Mhm.
the product has. So that's why, it's super valuable for me personally when I go and I talk to people. It's like, I have friends that are software developers, I have friends that work in IT, I have friends that work in marketing and business. Like, you ask them all the same question, get their opinions to
Yes.
understand where they struggle with, whether it's the product side or whether it's the marketing side. Or it's like, yeah, we built this really cool tool, but we can't sell it because nobody knows about it. And that doesn't work, right? But we can't sell a product that doesn't work, so we need the software. So
Right.
everyone kind of needs each other. Is what I've figured out over the last couple of
Yeah,
years.
don't ever go into a situation assuming that your way is the only way or the right way,
Yeah,
because someone will always say, "Well, did you ever think about using it or thinking about it this way?" And
yeah, like
if
of
you
course not.
right,
Yeah,
and if you are very rigid and don't say, "Oh, maybe I need to really rethink my perspective here."
no, that's interesting. Um, Want to take us into the rapid fire round. So this is a round I do for each person I talk to. Just a set of questions. Um, I'm gonna just run through these. Give me a quick answer. Don't need any explanation. Just want to understand better. Where you're at.
Cool.
Uh, Terminal or the GUI?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh,
What I said I wasn't going to expand, but that answer deserves an expansion. Why both?
one, I can be so much more productive in the terminal,
Hmm.
but I also need to understand that the work I do in the terminal is going to affect the user that uses the GUI.
Got it. So like the front end, the back end, right?
Yeah.
So even though it says in code that it does X, Y, Z, you need to confirm that for the user.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Favorite shell, ZSH, Bash, or something more exotic?
I'm a Z shell person.
Yep.
It's more, I like the customization I can do. I like the fun that I can have in it. Um,
I'm also a Z shell guy.
Bash is what I've got to push out from a scripting perspective, just because it's kind of
The standard.
yeah.
Yeah. What is the most rewarding project that you've ever worked on? And I'm not talking about professionally,
Yeah.
personally. What is the most rewarding personal project that you've ever worked on?
Personally,
Yeah.
um, that's a tough one.
These are rapid fire
Yeah,
questions, man.
I know.
I'm just
I know.
I'm just giving you a hard
But,
time.
it would probably be something, and I don't even know if I can call it a project, but it would be, doing the Leadville 100 mountain bike race.
Okay. Interesting.
And that was the rewarding, because one, it was physically rewarding, it was mentally rewarding, but then also I was able to do that with a group of friends, and so it was
Yeah.
brought us together even that much closer. So I don't even know if you can call it a project, but
I think that's sort of a project.
yeah,
I think anything that requires your time and effort you
yeah.
can consider a project, which I'm sure preparing for that was not a nothing effort.
It was many, 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 many months.
Right. Yeah. So that
Yeah.
that I consider that a project. You're obviously you live in Charlotte. I think you were from Virginia, right? Yes,
Grew up in Virginia.
grew up in Virginia. You lived in Charlotte a long time.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing to do in Charlotte?
Uh, I love exploring, a lot of the new restaurants
Okay.
that are out there, and then I like being able to head out to somewhere like the Whitewater Center.
Oh yeah, me too.
Break out from,
I think I'm gonna get a
the
pass
city.
this year.
Yeah,
It's a cool spot.
yeah. They
Yeah.
have concerts every week.
Yeah.
It's just a good, relaxing spot
Yeah.
that has a wide variety of things that you can do. You can just go chill, you can go hit the trails, you can rock climb, you can do all the
It's so funny because so many people I talk to that work in tech, their only hobbies are things that require like an enormous amount of outside time. From running and mountain biking to cycling to
Yep.
trail running to whitewater rafting, anything that gets them away from the screen, I think interest them when they're not working. I'd be curious to see if people that worked in like higher finance or, like a clerical job, accounting, if they felt the same way. Um, I don't think so.
I don't think so either, but I can't say for sure 'cause
I can't say for
I would
sure
have to
either.
explore that.
Yeah. And then lastly, what is the first thing you do every day when you wake up?
The first thing I do every day
Yeah.
is literally pet the dog and take the dog out for a
Nice.
walk, and then it's exercise time.
You don't check the repos or
Nope,
take photos? No?
nope.
No, I love that. Well, cool. I'll close this out with a big thanks to you, Matt, for showing us that even in the world of code and automation, the human element and a little bit of creative flair is what makes the system truly work. I'm Austin Lutz, and this is LutzTalk. Until next time.